you for hanging out.
I think she was a free spirit in many ways. So he was very much infatuated with her in the beginning.
Welcome back. Thank you so much.
He would tell me that she was crazy. When he said crazy, I didn't realize he meant absolutely mad.
The community will always be fascinated by the murder weapon, a stiletto heel. Let's face it, that's why we're talking about this. But it was so much more than that. It was a good man who died a tragic death and a woman that wielded that stiletto heel. Stefan Andersson and Anna Trujillo were out in the medical center area of town. They had gone to the bar. Stefan drank a little bit, Anna drank a whole lot.
Last people to really see them alive together were the taxi cab driver, who said that she was verbally accosting him in the cab.
I said, please be careful. She's not in her right mind. And he said, oh, I will. And he said,
and she tells us she prayed over Stefan because she felt something was wrong.
Why you need medical, police, or fire?
I need help. I need you here right now. And
I'm trying to get someone out to you, ma'am. Are there any weapons involved?
Oh, he's gonna beat me up.
What happened to him?
I hit him with my shoe. You know what else to do.
You hit him with your shoe?
Do you know how many times you hit him with your shoe?
No, I don't.
Breathe.
I will never forget the crime scene.
Breathe. That's fine.
The brutal nature.
He's bleeding. He's about to die. Can you get somebody over here?
How personal it was.
Her suitcases were by the door. She was leaving that night or the next morning, and he went berserk.
There was nothing to suggest that Stefan Andersson was anything but kind.
Top story this morning. Police are looking for the motive in the beating death of a man in the museum district.
The weapon investigators think she used a stiletto heel.
I got that shoe in it. Yeah, I was hitting him to please get away, right?
They were 5.5-inch heels, and there was actually a steel rod in them that showed up in the x-ray.
The details of the killing garnered national attention.
It was very sensational. People could not believe she could have beat him to death with her stiletto shoe.
She shook, grimaced, even got off the stand to show the jury what happened.
And she got into a fight with him, and, she ended up winning.
She is a monster. She really deserves to be in jail.
And I'm so sorry. I loved him.
It was a case that captivated the country. A prominent research professor attacked and killed with a 5-inch blue suede stiletto heel.
His ex-girlfriend claimed self-defense, but during her highly publicized trial, the world began to hear a different story.
We're just not used to that kind of violence and that kind of brutality coming from a woman, number one. Two, the fact that she used as a murder weapon her own high heel shoe.
Our story starts here, the Parklane condominiums, not a place where you'd expect murder. The Parklane was a glamorous 35-story Houston high-rise with panoramic city views in the heart of Houston's upscale museum district. But the morning of June 9th, 2013, this iconic building became a crime scene.
And we're learning new information about a woman accused of killing a man with the most unusual weapon, using a stiletto heel.
A renowned research professor killed in his own home. He was 59-year-old biochemist Dr. Stefan Andersson.
He was a professor at the University of Houston. He had family, he had colleagues, he had students. He was in the pharmaceutical industry, just really a pioneer in his industry, and was so well respected.
Stefan had moved to Houston a couple years earlier, half a world away from the small town in Sweden where he grew up. One of his closest friends, Annika Lundqvist.
He loved sun. Sweden is it's like Alaska, it's very dark. And even when it's sunny, it's not as warm or bright.
So after earning his PhD in pharmaceutical biochemistry in Sweden, it was his research that brought him to the U.S.
That was like a relief for him when he could leave that city.
And he landed here in Texas.
With Texas came his dream job. Stefan started at the UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas, studying an enzyme associated with prostate disease. He also met his dream woman and married. But after a few years, the two went their separate ways. Amicable divorce, just two different people.
But yeah, I think he was very, very disappointed when they split up, and I think he saw some little pitter-patter of feet, like in the future with them.
Newly single with no real responsibilities, Stefan poured himself into work. It's how he met Annika, a researcher working in his lab and a fellow Swede.
We just clicked. It was like he could talk to anyone. But it was because he listened. And that's partly why he was so popular with people, I think. He was curious about them.
Annika tried looking after her friend, concerned about some of his relationships.
Stefan was always concerned about women, and he was concerned about their welfare in general, but he was always worried that they didn't have money, for example. So he was always willing to give money or lend money.
When you said to Stefan, like, stand up for yourself, don't let these women take advantage of you, what would he say to you?
I am, or something. He couldn't. He was just...
Passive with his relationships, as friends say, but so passionate about his career. So in 2009, Stefan jumped on a new opportunity as a research professor at the University of Houston, studying women's reproductive health issues. A new city where he met a new woman. Finally, he thought, someone special. She wasn't like the women he'd dated before. She was fiery, seductive. Someone he never imagined could be dangerous. Ana Trujillo was the new woman in Stefan's life.
He was so taken by her in the beginning. She was little, kind of perky and kind of a little crazy, and he liked a little crazy, so like moderately crazy.
She was a twice-divorced mom of 2 grown daughters. At 43, she was 15 years younger than Stefan. She described herself as an artist and occasionally hosted a local public access TV show.
I have somebody that is part of the community.
The two met in the lobby of Stefan's apartment building, that luxury high-rise, the Parklane, back in 2012. At the time, Anna was seeing another man who lived there, but after a whirlwind romance, she moved in with Stefan. At first, he seemed happier than ever.
Yeah, he was giddy, like a little teenager almost. So he was very much infatuated with her in the beginning. I think it was her bubbliness, and a little bit of craziness. And she had kids, so he told me that. And he was kind of happy about that too, because it was like if they were kind of going to be together, it's going to be his kids too a little bit. He was happy in the beginning, and I was happy for him.
But it wasn't long before Stefan's friends began to see signs of trouble between him and Anna.
There was no connection. There was nothing. It was wall.
When you met her?
Yeah, I could not read her. She didn't speak at all to me. She just was there, but no.
Were you surprised? I mean, he had just spoken so highly of this woman.
Yes, I was very surprised that...
when did it start to get...
I would say like a month after that, maybe. That's when he started being evasive when I talked to him about her. He didn't sound as happy any longer. But when he started being crazy things going on.
What kind of crazy things?
Oh, one night she woke up when she lived in his apartment, and there was some spirits or something behind the freezer fridge. So she pulled it out to kind of get the spirits out. And she pulled off all the hoses to the ice machine, so it was leaking, so it flooded the apartment under.
Water had come out all over the floor, and the different maintenance workers were familiar with her damaging his physical property.
But he didn't tell me anything until he had asked her to move out, and I think that was end of February. Good for him. That was the first time, I would say, he stood up for himself a little bit. He said, well, we broke up, but she refuses to pick up her things. So he had packed up her things in boxes, but she wouldn't. It's like if I don't pick them up, I'm still there and he has to take care of me.
Over, almost as quick as it started. That's the thing about fiery passion. The flame goes out. This surveillance video from the Parklane shows Stefan and Anna moving her things down to storage. By the spring of 2013, she was no longer living with Stefan, and he started dating Jeanette Jordan.
Yeah, he was calling on a regular basis. We were chatting. You know, I'd met his friends. It was fun. He was a nice guy to be around.
But Anna wasn't completely out of his life.
He would tell me that she was crazy and that he didn't want to see her anymore, but she was still coming around.
And he told me he was very excited because he had met this woman that he was seeing now.
This new woman?
Yes. Yeah, no. So Anna was out.
This particular evening that we'd gone out, he was late. And he eventually arrived, and he was like so apologetic. And he said, "I'm so sorry." He said, "She showed up. I don't know what to do. You know, she just keeps showing up. She's crazy, Jeanette." I just saw her as somebody that just didn't really get the message that he was moving on.
On the morning of June 9th, 2013, Jeanette was supposed to meet Stefan for brunch. The morning came, and he never called. Not even a text.
I was waiting for his phone call, and I remember the sky open, and it was pouring with rain. We were going to go back to Street Cafe. I remember it clearly. And I think I called him, and nobody picked up. And the whole day went by, and it just was so out of character for him to be like that. And the next day I was at work, and my phone just kept blowing off, and I was just like, what's going on? And then eventually somebody called on the landline and said, "Turn on the TV, Jeanette."
A man found beaten to death inside his Museum District area apartment.
And that's when I saw that he had been killed. It was, it was like something you just can't imagine. I didn't believe it when I saw it. I was just, no, that can't be him.
Did you immediately have this sinking feeling, oh, Anna's involved?
Oh, definitely, 100%. It wasn't a doubt in my mind. When he said crazy, I didn't realize he meant absolutely mad. You know, she was absolutely wild.
03:41 and 02 seconds.
Why you need medical, police, or fire?
Please, I need help.
Where are you located, ma'am?
1701 Lemon Drive. My boyfriend got battered.
Inside condo 18B, blood on the walls, on the carpet, and a hysterical Anna.
Okay, ma'am. Hello?
Give it up. Wow.
Okay, you're going to have to stop crying for her or calm down so I can understand what you're saying.
10 minutes on the phone with 911 and two different dispatchers could barely understand Anna. Through all the sobbing and wailing, couldn't understand that a man was dying.
Okay, I can't understand what you're saying. You're saying what, ma'am?
Listen, he's about to die.
Okay, what happened to him?
Oh, he started beating me up.
What happened to him?
I hit him with my shoe. You know what else to do.
You hit him with your shoe?
A bloody size 9, 5.5-inch blue suede closed-toe pump lay on a man's black jacket. Pieces of Stefan's blonde hair matted to the heel. A Houston police officer working the graveyard shift quickly arrived, searching door to door for the woman who called 911.
He could hear her, and he heard what he basically considered yelling or a disturbance.
Nothing could have prepared the officer for what he saw when Anna answered the door.
And she was covered in blood. And he thought, again, that she was the victim. And so he starts looking at her, but she has no wounds.
And then he saw it, looking past Anna, a body in the hall, the body of Dr. Stefan Andersson.
That he thought he had been shot in the face.
Blood was everywhere, and blood told a story. Which is why officers called HPD crime scene investigator Chris Duncan, who understood blood spatter better than anyone, certified by the state as an expert in that area, one of only 2 people in Texas at the time.
And you go into these with an open mind.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, we're just trying to figure out what happened. And blood can tell you a lot of things.
And what was the first thing that made you realize, wait a second?
I think the first thing was that the blood was primarily low to the ground, 2 feet from the floor to 2 feet above. What that kind of tells you is the assault, the attack, whatever happened, occurred on the floor.
And if they were on the floor, but Stefan's blood ended up on the wall across the hall, Duncan says that told him this didn't appear to be two people fighting each other. No, this looked like one person was swinging over and over. And to the right of Stefan's body lay the blood-soaked, sky-high stiletto with steel-reinforced heel.
When it first happened in the city, it was very sensational. People could not believe she could have beat him to death with her stiletto shoe. Everyone assumed that this man had done something wrong. He must be the bad guy for this woman to have attacked him with her shoe.
The horror of what Stefan endured was clear. What was unclear was what really happened between him and Anna leading up to his murder. We know the night before, when Anna showed up, the two of them came here to bar 5015 in Houston's Museum District. It was one of Anna's favorite spots. Stefan had no way of knowing that the night would be his last.
Basically, she kills him on their last night together when he had tried to end things weeks ago and had even had a date with a new girlfriend.
At 7:15 p.m., less than 9 hours before Stefan is murdered, the two are seen on surveillance video, leaving his Parklane condo together. At bar 5015, the two are seen again on surveillance video drinking for hours, sharing a bottle of wine and 6 tequila shots. The video shows Stefan sitting at the bar, mostly keeping to himself. At one point, Anna dances on a bar stool, and she's seen talking and laughing with men sitting at the bar. It was around 1:45 a.m. when the two finally left, together, getting into a cab outside.
And you were the driver of that yellow cab that night?
Yes, sir.
This is the cab driver, Rosemary Gomez. Rosemary said both Stefan and Anna appeared to be intoxicated, but she says Anna was aggressive from the get-go.
Yes, the lady proceeds to tell me how to go and how to drive. She said, we're going to so-and-so address, and you good up here, and she said something, and I said, ma'am, I got this. I'm going to put it in the GPS, and we'll follow. She said, I'm telling you how to go. The gentleman, Mr. Esteban, he was very calm, very patient, very, passive type of person.
Rosemary said on the short ride to the Parklane, Anna's anger escalated. And when they pulled up to Stefan's apartment, Anna got out of the cab, and Rosemary told Stefan she'd had enough.
And I looked at Mr. Esteban. I said, Mr. Esteban, that's it. I'm calling the police, because she was, to the point where she was too drunk, she was cursing, and she was starting to get mean. And
she says Stefan begged her not to call police, and as he paid her $7 for the ride, Rosemary told investigators she told Stefan, stay away from that woman.
He said, I can't control her, I can't handle her, I can't tell her what to do. I said, please be careful. And he said, oh, I will. And he said, you're a kind lady, you're nice people, thank you. And he squeezed my hand again, and he left.
Surveillance video shows Stefan walking back through the lobby, returning to the apartment where his life was about to end.
He just looked very defeated as he walked across that lobby.
What really happened inside this condo and what led up to the attack, we may never know. Anna has her story, and she wasn't shy to share it with investigators.
I'm a very spiritual person.
Immediately, Anna Trujillo was taken in for questioning. She sat with police for almost 3 hours, rambling about her 2 past marriages and her other relationships with men, telling them she'd been abused before.
I myself have been assaulted, and he knew that I suffer from post-traumatic disorder, and I have. From then, I get nervous, and I can't go outside from place to place.
In the interview room, Anna sat covered in Stefan's blood, clothing that, as a blood stain expert, Chris Duncan says he needed to see as soon as possible.
And what did her clothing tell you?
What I saw were heavy transfer stains on the inside of the thighs. The only part of his body that bled that much was his head. So that tells me her legs were wrapped around his head. That's saying that's self-defense. She's not on the ground. He is. She's not.
Just get your stand over here for me.
Duncan took these photos of Anna in the middle of her interrogation. Photographed her black top, her bloody jeans. He says he also looked for anything that backed up Anna's story, that this was self-defense.
I was expecting to see a black eye. I was expecting to see injuries on the hand, defensive wounds, something.
So no fresh injuries on her?
No fresh injury.
What was her demeanor like?
Matter of fact.
After Duncan was done with her, Anna went back into the interrogation room to finish with police. She described Stefan as a guy she wasn't interested in at all initially.
And his age, he's older. I'm not interested in being with an older gentleman.
Surveillance video captured them hours earlier leaving the Parklane together. Anna told police she had moved in with Stefan the previous year to see if they could make a relationship work.
So he said, "No, Anna, I am interested in you enough to want to marry you. I want to tell you that, that I'm serious." I said, "Well, I'm not going to say I'm going to marry you, but why don't, because you move in, you can stay here and we can try it." I said, "You know what? I will be open to that." He completely became obsessed with me. He loved me, and he was like I was his everything.
She went on, saying Stefan bought her expensive gifts. In fact, it seemed Anna was willing to talk about everything and anything when it came to the relationship.
We went shopping one time, and he bought me $4,000 shoes, no, a purse and shoes. Well, he wanted stilettos for $1,500 for stilettos, okay? And then he bought a purse for $4,000.
Everything except what had just happened. About an hour into the interview, Anna learned Stefan had died. She hadn't asked before that.
He died?
Yeah, Stefan is dead, yes.
I was giving him mouth to mouth.
Right, I know.
Then, briefly, finally, the conversation turned to what she says happened, the attack.
And then he just came and towards me. He goes, "You're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to leave me again, ever." And I'm like, "No." So he grabbed me, and we started turning, so I was having him, and I was like, "Please, Stefan, and he was growling and I was like, "Stefan, you're bleeding. Please, look, I need to get off of you so you can breathe. Please, will you please not hurt me?"
Despite Anna's version of the story, she was charged with murder in the death of Dr. Stefan Andersson.
We are learning more this evening about
weapon investigators think she used a stiletto heel.
Now, Anna Trujillo is charged with killing.
What I think happened that night is, I know she could get into his cell phone. I think she got it and saw that he had texted to another woman. I don't think she had realized that before.
Her story is they're engaged, they're going to get married. He was drinking, he started to put his hands on me, he was aggressive. When that story starts to trickle out and you start to hear those...
Oh, I was furious because I knew it was wrong, of course. I knew he was broken up with her and there was no way he was going to marry her. Or she claims that that's what he was. I still get furious when I think about this.
Just 2 days after Stefan's death, Anna was in front of the cameras again, making her first court appearance.
The complainant appeared to have about 10 puncture wounds to the head, some being 1 to 1.5 inch deep. He also had 15 to 20 other puncture wounds along his face.
As Anna was escorted out of court that very first time, she ran into defense attorney Jack Carroll.
I had a case that day. I knew nothing about this, and there were a bunch of cameras and everything else, and they seemed to be focusing on Anna. And then she was trying to get my attention, and I didn't recognize her.
After researching Anna online, Carol decided to take her case pro bono.
I thought she was, I really thought she was innocent. I thought it was a good self-defense case.
Did you have a good relationship, would you say, overall with Anna, you felt?
I think she trusted me. I thought we had a decent relationship, but there was just something with Anna that you couldn't connect with. It's just, sociopath, whatever.
Jack Carroll started prepping for trial.
Would you say this was a difficult case?
When I first really started studying the case, I didn't think it would be that difficult. Except for Anna herself, I didn't think that she'd be a very attractive witness.
Stefan's dead, yes.
When she was interviewed by Homicide, she didn't know that he had died. And when they told her he died, she just didn't really seem, very remorseful.
Part of that prep was researching Dr. Stefan Andersson.
He was actually a pretty nice man. He wasn't violent, and I couldn't get any people that would testify that they'd have seen him lose his temper or actually really be abusive to her.
What was her self-defense? What did she say her reasoning was?
Dr. Andersson was a full-blown alcoholic. He went to a rehab. He spent, I think, a month in a rehab, and he was going to AA and just didn't take with him.
Right before he met her, did he checked into a rehab, or the drinking had picked up, right?
Yeah,
so talk to me, because that's a big part of this story that other people try and say, the drinking was heavy. Talk to me about that.
So moving down to Houston, everything new, new job, new people that he has to kind of connect to, have to find an apartment. I think it was extremely stressful for him that time, and well, he probably has a bit of depression too, self-medicated with alcohol.
When he would drink and have a good time, did you ever see him aggressive?
No.
Never?
No. He didn't know how to be aggressive.
The prosecutors on the case, John Jordan and Sarah Mickelson Seeley, began preparing too, looking into Anna's past and talking to people who knew her.
And she would get highly intoxicated throughout the night, and multiple people came forward saying that she had physically assaulted them. There was a man who she had bit him on the top of his head. There was another man she had previously dated, and she bit him on the cheek when she was trying to break up with him.
Anna would later deny in court that she had a drinking problem or that she ever attacked anyone unprovoked. But Brian Goodney had a similar story. He's a former friend of Anna's. He told prosecutors about 3 years before Stefan's death, he had taken Anna to a dinner party. When they went back to his apartment, he says out of nowhere, she attacked him.
Turn around, walk her to the door, turn around to open the door, and get hit on the back of the head with a candlestick.
That was the last thing you remembered.
She knocked me out.
He never filed a police report, but later learned she had against him. But he was never charged and never interviewed by police.
Oh, I was the first one that she tried this on. Oh, I was the lucky one.
Back in 2010, before she met Stefan, Anna once lived here at the Lawndale Hotel. When prosecutors interviewed the hotel's manager, he was very familiar with Anna.
I remember seeing something on the news about it, and I said, oh, that sounds like Anna. Why? She told me that if anybody ever messes with me, they're going to get this and the F and I. And it was a high heel shoe, a black one, with a stiletto metal gray that looked like an ice pick.
Prosecutors knew the defense would have a tough time portraying Stefan, the friendly and well-respected research professor, as an abuser. But Jack Carroll planned to argue Anna had a history of being abused and acted in self-defense, doing what she had to protect herself.
There was a clump of his hair that was by a couch that had been tipped over, and he pushed her over the couch, and he was a fairly big guy, and I think he had a wrestling background from where he was from in Europe. She used what she could to defend herself.
Our defense team was very proactive in the media and trying to present her as a sympathetic and a victim.
I get irritated still when I remember how she was lying.
March 31st, 2014 was a beautiful day in downtown Houston. Calm, peaceful, but inside the Harris County Criminal Justice Center, it was anything but. It had been 9 months since Stefan's death, and Anna Trujillo's murder trial started.
Reporters from across the country crowded outside the courtroom.
It's like a carnival to me. I mean, I'd go to court and there'd be, 5, 6, 7 cameras outside.
Opening arguments began today in the murder trial of Ana Trujillo.
It was on the news all day. It was the talk all around the courthouse.
On day one, prosecutors put Ana's now infamous blood-soaked stiletto at the front of the courtroom, and there it would stay throughout the entire trial. In her opening statement, Seeley used her own blue stiletto to show the jury the brutal way Stefan died. On his back, struck in the face and the head again and again and again, 25 times with Ana's heel.
I remember when I kneeled down on the ground, I remember there being gasps in the courtroom because, again, people just didn't believe that a shoe could be a murder weapon or that it wouldn't break.
There was not one grab on her. There was no marks on her. So even in the last moments of Stefan Andersson's life, as he is being pummeled by a high heel shoe that was like an ice pick, he still didn't reach out to hurt her. That tells you everything.
At one point during trial, prosecutor John Jordan climbed on top of a courtroom table, straddled a mannequin, showing how Ana stabbed Stefan repeatedly with her heel, a scene that became courthouse lore.
That reenactment was really key to showing the energy that was required to create these bloodstains.
And I think it was a dramatic moment that really struck home that she was the aggressor. But I think it was a lasting image with the jury, especially of her being on top, her having the shoe, and her just repeatedly striking him. And especially because in our case, all of the blood spatter was about 18 inches off the ground.
How important is it for a jury to understand the importance of this blood spatter?
In this particular case, I believe it was crucial. If you take the blood out of the equation, it's he said, she said, and you're giving the jury a 50-50 shot at it. I think the blood was able to overcome that reasonable doubt.
The state's own pathologist said they were superficial wounds. With the pictures and the blood spatter evidence and all that, it looked a lot worse than it actually was.
And then there were huge just pools of blood underneath him. And ultimately he died of blood loss. So we actually had the medical examiner x-ray the heels. They were 5.5-inch heels, and there was actually a steel rod in them that showed up in the x-ray.
He came in towards me, he goes, "You're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to leave me again, ever."
But how would the state handle Ana's claim that Stefan had asked her to move back in, saying he never wanted her to leave, as she told police the night of the murder? Well, prosecutors said that story simply wasn't true. They showed the jury pictures of her packed suitcases by the door of Stefan's condo, saying she had already moved out of the Parklane and was set to return to her hometown of Waco, Texas.
We believe that he was letting her stay overnight as she was going to be leaving. And I think Stefan was done with the relationship. He was done with the drama, done with the abuse, but he was too kind to not open his door for her for a night or two.
Prosecutors say on June 8th, the day before the murder, the day she was supposed to leave, her bus ride fell through.
She wasn't going anywhere until the next day, and she didn't have any place to stay, so she was going to stay over in his apartment as a friend.
Stefan was always helping his friends, Annika says, and now those friends were helping him, testifying one after another. Jeanette was one of the first witnesses called by the state.
Do you remember what the trial was like and being asked to testify? Do you remember those days?
Oh my God, yes, very, very well. Yeah. I was petrified. I remember looking straight ahead and I could see the jury on the left. I could see her. I could see the shoe. They had the shoe on the table. I can see the shoe right now. It was horrible. They were asking me about his character, trying to portray him as somebody who was, strong and pushed her to the ground, and that wasn't his character at all. And I was telling them in court that he was kind of a gentle person. He wasn't the type of guy to throw her to the floor and be, savagely attacking somebody. That's just hardly, not even close.
And remember the cab driver?
I told Mr. Esteban, you need to be careful. I said.
Jurors also heard from her, Rosemary Gomez, one of the last people to see Stefan and Ana together. Rosemary testified Ana was so aggressive and threatening in her cab that when Ana got out, Rosemary said she warned Stefan to stay away from her, then prayed over him.
I wish you'd listen to the cab driver.
That was powerful testimony from her.
To me, that was huge.
Anna's attorney argued it was Stefan who was out of control, saying he abused alcohol often. On the night he was killed, his blood alcohol level was almost twice the legal limit.
I think we've all seen people that drink a lot and, act one way in public and they go home and they act a different way. Anna was alone in Stefan Andersson's apartment and he went off the deep end.
The defense did their own dramatic demonstration, too, calling an MMA expert to show how they say Anna and Stefan may have fought in the minutes before he was killed.
I mean, he had a time wrestling with her. I was trying to figure out exactly, what happened that night, so I hired him to show how she had fought with the doctor, and she was giving him a run for his money. I mean, I think Anna's one of those 1 in a million that are actually just extremely strong.
Carol also called into question whether or not Stefan was actually dead when police arrived. He put on a pathologist who testified that paramedics at the scene should have tried harder to save Stefan, should have given him more first aid.
I felt there was a strong case that he may have died while they were investigating the so-called murder.
But prosecutors argued there was a time discrepancy. A neighbor told police they heard a man's voice yelling around 2:13 a.m. Anna's call to 911 came more than an hour later at 3:41 a.m.
And don't you think if he was revivable, if they could have saved his life, they would have? To accuse a captain of a fire department to show up at the scene and not recognize that someone has already passed. That is why, tragically, the crime scene photos, Stefan is still in them, because if there's any kind of hope of life, they're transported. So that's just not true.
Okay, ma'am, we're dispatching emergency units to 1701 Herman, apartment.
So by the time 911 got there, when you consider the amount of impact wounds and the amount of blood that he had lost, that was all a direct result of her actions before she ever notified anyone he needed help.
Jurors heard others talk about Anna. They heard her 911 call. They heard her 3-hour-long police interrogation. But the question on everyone's mind, would she testify in her own defense?
I must have had Anna in this office 40, 50, 60 hours trying to talk to her and to get her prepared for her testimony. But it was like talking to a wall. I'd tell her something and I'd ask her to repeat it for me. I'd ask her to practice and then she'd go right back to what she'd said before. I couldn't, it was very hard to deal with her as a witness.
And so Anna did not take the stand. After 2 weeks of emotional testimony, closing arguments.
It won't be until your just verdict that she ceases to be the stiletto stabber, and she will then forever be Anna Trujillo, murderer.
It took the jury less than 2 hours to reach a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Anna Trujillo, also known as Anna Fox, guilty of murder as charged in the indictment, signed foreman of the jury.
Well, it was the quickest guilty verdict I ever had. I thought the trial had gone well, but I was surprised.
This case was very black and white. There was one person who was kind, one person who was sweet, one person who was educated, one person who was well respected in the community, and then there was Anna Trujillo.
Anna Trujillo was now a convicted murderer, immediately taken into custody, seen mouthing the words, "I love you," to her family. But the trial wasn't over. Anna was back in court the very next day to find out her fate.
We were going on a pure self-defense for the guilt innocence, but with the sudden passion, that comes up for the punishment phase.
Jack Carroll hoped to convince the jury that Anna acted in the heat of sudden passion, which would limit her sentence.
If there's a sudden passion charge that goes in there, it would knock it down to a manslaughter, and the range of punishment would be 2 to 20.
Jack, what did you say to her after the verdict?
Sorry.
But this time, he would have to convince the jury that Anna killed Stefan only as a last resort to save her own life.
I think the jury will hopefully understand that, Anna's a human being. It's not a monster that they're trying to portray her as.
Prosecutors were up first, calling a string of witnesses who testified they saw Anna act out when she was drunk. That included Brian Goodney, that former friend who said she clubbed him with a candlestick.
I was the very fortunate one. And I'm still here, and unfortunately he's not.
All of these people from all walks of life all told us the same thing. Their encounters with Dr. Andersson, he couldn't have been a more professional, gentleman, peaceful man. And anybody who had an encounter with Anna Trujillo said she was the exact opposite.
But what would the jury think? Would they believe Anna acted in sudden passion when she attacked Stefan? This time, Anna decided to take the stand, giving her side of the story.
Well, if you can show sudden passion, where it wasn't planned, and you can show that they hadn't been thinking about it for a while, and it was just boom, I think it was an obvious sudden passion case. Her suitcases were right by the door. They'd both been drinking heavily, and she told him that she was leaving, and I think we made a pretty good case that, he didn't want her to leave.
We have the pictures of how she was the night of the incident, and there's not one bruise on her from him even grabbing her.
Anna spent nearly 6 hours on the stand. She cried, told jurors Stefan was controlling and needy, but her tearful testimony often strayed away from Stefan, rambling at times, just like that police interview where she sat in blood-soaked jeans.
Her tears, crocodile tears, yeah.
That ended up being somewhat comical, just if you see the photographs of her on the stand and being so dramatic. And I guess that was charming to some people. In her life, that's how she got into people's lives. But to the 12 citizens that we bravely picked to be on our jury, it wasn't.
She never said one thing Dr. Andersson actually did to her.
That's true.
She never said, he hit me, he choked me, he grabbed me, he punched me. You beat him to death and you've never said anything he did to you. I don't understand any other result.
After 2 days of testimony in the punishment phase, closing arguments began for the second time. Prosecutors didn't hold back, asking jurors to give Anna the maximum punishment, life in prison.
The one thing we know about Anna Trujillo, she's not mentally unstable. She's crazy, but scary crazy.
When Jack Carroll addressed the jury, he acknowledged he felt as if he had failed.
And I believe something, because you're out less than 2 hours. So what was it that I missed?
He asked the jury to give her a sentence of just 2 years behind bars.
And I'm asking you to come back with a unanimous decision on sudden passion and to show mercy to Miss Trujillo, who needs mercy so much right now.
But there would be no mercy shown. The jury deliberated for 5 hours before deciding Anna Trujillo's fate.
Assess her punishment at confinement in the Institutional Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for life. Signed, foreman of the jury.
Life behind bars. For Stefan Andersson's family, who flew across the globe for the trial, it was the justice they had been waiting for.
My uncle was a great man. He was kind, and he did everything for everyone all the time. Yeah, he didn't deserve what happened to him.
But to Jack Carroll, the sentence was shocking.
And the jury could have, given her 20 years or 10 years, but they chose to go for life. That would really surprise me.
Should she spend the rest of her life in prison?
100%. Absolutely, 100%. She took that man away from all the wonderful things that he could have done for people in the future. He wanted to retire. He was giving a lot of time to students and to the faculty and to friends and family. He wanted to read all the books that he said he hadn't read. And he had these great ideas of his last chapter in his life, really, and it was all taken away from him.
Anna Trujillo is currently serving her life sentence here at the Gatesville Correctional Facility.
A decade has now passed since Dr. Stefan Andersson's death. Outside these prison walls, the world has changed so much. But inside, Anna Trujillo still sticks to her story.
Do you feel that you were wrongfully convicted of murder?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I do.
I love this man. I care deeply for him. The simple truth is that I was leaving and he held me against my will, and all I wanted to do was to leave. That's it. There is no other motive. There is no other thing.
But while Anna's story hasn't changed, Stefan's friends and family say they'll never believe it.
I think if you keep telling yourself something enough, then you'll end up believing it, and that's probably that's all she's got to hang on to, isn't it? Because otherwise, terrible, evil person.
She keeps saying it and hopes that someone's going to believe her.
By myself, don't like knowing that my part in somebody dying. It's hard for me to even accept her. I accept it, I know it. And I'm deeply remorseful, and my heart goes out to his family for his loss.
Do you think her heart goes out to his family, his friends?
No, not at all. She's just completely self-absorbed and caring about herself and desperate to think that maybe something could be overturned.
Now 55 years old, Anna says she's become a grandmother and hopes one day she'll be able to be with her family outside of prison walls.
Do you relive that day over and over and over?
I used to, yes. I used to not want to live. It took me a long time to be here, to get to where I'm now productive. I live because I want my daughters to know that they are worth me living.
What do you want your grandbaby to know about who you are, despite the things that are said about what happened in 2013?
That it's out of love and compassion that I put myself in the situation that I did. That it was not hatred or vengeance or any malice at all. I wanted it to work. I wanted him to recover. He was an alcoholic.
As the only person left alive, she's allowed to say whatever she wants happened in that apartment. And his family had to live through that until we got inside the courtroom.
Guilty of murder as charged in the
And that's one of the moments of my career where I really feel like the criminal justice system worked for victims, because so many times, as we know, they don't really have a voice, and they felt like the jury's verdict of a life sentence was just this resounding rejection of everything she had been allowed to say up until the trial.
So much of your work is about the science and the facts and getting to the truth. But really, at the end of the day, this is a person with a life and a family. Do you think about Stefan ever? Do you think about, the person behind this horrific ending?
Are there a handful of truly innocent victims that I remember? Yes, Stefan's one of them.
Do you think his inability to stand up to her, to a woman, is what got him killed?
Yeah. And his inability to see that women can be evil too. The killer is in prison, but that doesn't bring Stefan back. And I still feel that the lies she told about him are still there. Her lies will always be out there. And it will always taint his reputation slightly, unfortunately.